Over the past several days, I've been contacted by really an unusually large number of viewers asking me to weigh in on this story that people might recall just 1 week ago, Dr. Corsi told me about when Ghislaine Maxwell was spotted at the In-N-Out Burger. Let's listen to that.
Also today, this Ghislaine Maxwell has been found. She just showed up. The Post has had it running a story on it right now. She was spotted at a In-N-Out Burger. You know, I was sitting outside at a fast food burger place, and this was in Universal City, Los Angeles.
Oh, wow. That's right near where I used to. Oh, my God. This is
So
my old
people
remember my surprise
So
in
the
seeing
FBI
Ghislaine Maxwell right at the In-N-Out Burger near my old house. So there's been a lot of reporting about this. The New York Post was the first major newspaper to come out with the story, and that was the one that Dr. Corsi was telling me about. This was just 1 week ago to the day, and people had a lot of questions about this photo. There are a number of different photos that have emerged now, and there's been a lot of reporting on it. Ed from The Outer Light, who has a great YouTube channel, has been doing really excellent coverage of this, but I feel like there's some conclusions that have been drawn that are perhaps incorrect. So I wanted to do just a quick overview before the show I'll do this afternoon with Dr. Corsi. We've got another episode of Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America coming up at 5 p.m. Eastern, so make sure you tune in for that. But I wanted to take people through a little bit of a sort of a Photoshop tour of some of these images so that we can get a handle on what may or may not be happening. Now, this is basically a scan of the cover of the New York Post. Now, I didn't purchase the Post that day, so we're limited to the resolution of the scans that people made, and it's important for people to keep that in mind. I wanted everybody to see what this image looks like when we zoom right in on the pixels again. So this is a digital photo that's been sent to the New York Post, published in the newspaper. There's a printing process for the newspaper. It then gets scanned by someone else, and that's what we're looking at right now. I want people to keep that in mind because each of these processes introduce certain anomalies in the image that we can detect. So let's go. I've downloaded sort of the best versions of these different photos that I could find, and many people are questioning Ghislaine herself. She's a woman in her late 50s. I think she's 57. She appears that way in this image. There's another image that was taken, the main image, which she looks considerably younger to me. Ghislaine, by most accounts, was an attractive woman, still is an attractive woman, but in her youth was sort of known for that. And I think that attractive women that I've known sometimes have difficulty with aging. Let's call them vain people, have a little difficulty in confronting their age. So the question is this, as reported in the New York Post and the Daily News, a casual diner at the In-N-Out Burger who happened to see Ms. Maxwell sitting there and snapped a picture on their smartphone and sent it to the New York Post? Or is it, as has been reported in other outlets, including Business Insider, is this a staged photo of some kind? Well, it's definitely worth investigating, and of course Business Insider was all over this, first reporting that Maxwell was spotted at the In-N-Out Burger in Los Angeles, talking about what she ordered. People who aren't from California, I think In-N-Out, as far as I know, only exists in California and Nevada, maybe a few other states in the West there, but you can't get it in New York. I don't believe they exist outside the United States, but they're known for having these sort of special secret combinations of burgers that you can order that aren't on the menu. People in Los Angeles absolutely love In-N-Out Burger. I'm not a fast food fan. I do like burgers, but I try to be very healthy. I've eaten at that In-N-Out Burger. It's very close to my former home in Los Angeles, but I've only been there once, and frankly, I do not like In-N-Out Burger. Sorry, In-N-Out Burger, but it's just not my thing. So I want to talk about the photos. I want to talk about them in the context of how they might have been taken, why they might have been taken, what we can determine definitively, and what is out there that's pure speculation. So here we are. This is Google Maps, Google Earth, I should say. We've got the 101, the Hollywood freeway right there. And this is, as I said, very near my old home in Los Angeles. As we just go up Lancashire Boulevard here, we've got, this is a Nissan dealership, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's the Nissan dealership. They used to have a really awesome Nismo, what's that crazy super turbocharged four-wheel drive Nissan. So this is where I used to live. There is an Armenian church here. And then we've got the very big Nissan dealership. I can't believe I don't remember the name of that super famous, it's known as Godzilla, the Nissan GTR, of course. So this parking lot here contains all the vehicles they're selling at the Nissan dealership. And then right at the end of it is our In-N-Out Burger right here, where Ghislaine Maxwell was spotted. So she was sitting sort of right under here by these trees, and we can see the bus shelter where the poster in question was seen. This was an ad for the new movie Good Boys that I think is out, and people were saying that, obviously this photo from Google Earth is not from last week, but people are saying that they spoke with the outdoor advertising company and that this billboard, you know, was not what we saw in the photograph. Now this is out front advertising. I've seen these this JCD, whatever the company is, I've seen these in New York City. We're going to want to maybe take a closer look at one of those things, but we're going to come back to this in a moment. So this seating area over here is where Ghislaine Maxwell was seated. Now you'll notice how the parking lot is arranged. This is the entrance right here, and then cars are parked sort of diagonally across the way. I think this person with the backpack is sitting at the table Ghislaine was at, or possibly this table right in front of him. So let's go back to the photos of Ghislaine Maxwell, okay? So here, she's seated there looking sort of not so posed for the photograph. This looks very much like a photo that perhaps someone just snapped of an unsuspecting diner who realized they were having their photo taken, and it doesn't look quite so flattering to Ms. Maxwell. Now, I want people to notice certain details about this, that we can see. It's, we're talking about artifacts. When you take a picture with your smartphone, it's generally stored as a JPEG compressed image. JPEG stands for the Joint Photographic Experts Group. And many years ago, when digital photography was coming about, this group of photographic experts got together and ratified a software algorithm for compressing photos, taking very digitally large photos that required a lot of space to store on the computer or in your phone, and they would compress them. And the way that they do this is by mathematically analyzing each pixel in the photo. People are familiar with pixels. We know that when we look at a photo that is shown at a size that matches the resolution of the display, it looks like a smooth, sharp photographic image. But as we zoom in on the photo and we begin to blow it up such that the pixels, the picture elements that make up the image, become larger than the pixels in our display, we can see each individual square. And you can see that there are close colors adjacent to one another. And what this JPEG algorithm seeks to do is mathematically average these color values so that fewer pixels can be stored and the image requires less computer space to be saved. Now, the pixels and any anomalies or artifacts that are generated by this process become very much less noticeable when you look at it at the resolution of your screen at 1-to-1 resolution. But when we zoom in, these JPEG artifacts become apparent. Now, The article in the New York Post claims that this photo, the photo that appeared on the cover of the New York Post, was a paparazzi photo that was just casually snapped by a diner at the In-N-Out Burger. Now, eagle-eyed viewers, it's interesting that the New York Post has cropped it out, but eagle-eyed viewers, including Esoteric Ed from The Outer Light, noticed that there is another cell phone on the table right here. Across from this tray of food where Ghislaine Maxwell is eating, she appears to have a photo, a cell phone, or a Kindle, or a mini iPad, or some sort of a device there. So it does seem unusual that a person would have two of these devices with them, or that they would take both of them out and put them on the table here. Frequently people do that when they're dining, just drop the phone on the table so that any calls come in, they can get them. People have also noticed a second tray here. So perhaps it is suggested 2 cups, 2 trays, 2 phones, could be 2 people sitting here, and that has caused people to think that this photo was staged. Now, that's possible. We need to understand the difference between staging a photo, photoshopping a photo, and how those two things might interplay. Let's focus on this photo for a moment. I believe it was the Daily Mail that claimed that this photo was taken with a more sophisticated camera than a smartphone, and they decided that the depth of focus was their determining factor. I believe they're making a mistake in saying that. Depth of focus, as I understand it, has to do with the imaging plane in a camera, and I don't think that's what we're seeing here. I believe what they were saying is the depth of field would be different than that of a smartphone, and depth of field describes objects being photographed that are in focus and their distance to the lens. So obviously Ghislaine Maxwell is very much closer to us than Maselli's restaurant or this strip mall back here. She's in sharp focus, and I think what they were saying is that these things in the background, they seem to be slightly softer focus than Ghislaine Maxwell, and that would be due to the reduced depth of field of a larger format camera. The imaging plane in a smartphone is very, very small, and that results in a generally large depth of field. You may notice that when you take photos with your smartphone, almost everything, no matter the distance from the camera, is in focus. But if you've seen fashion photography and other types of images taken with a more sophisticated camera, there is this fall off of focus as things move further away from the point of focus. That's due to limited depth of field, and larger cameras allow the photographer to control that much more than a smartphone would. But I don't think that is definitive. It's hard to tell because there is quite a lot of depth of field here. And the biggest problem in analyzing these photos is that we just don't have the original images. These are all cropped. And I mean, we can tell even from this scan of the newspaper that it definitely seems like higher resolution versions exist, because this is sort of a full frame. But as we zoom in on Ghislaine, we can see she's not as sharp as she appears to be on the cover of the New York Post. So somewhere there is a higher quality version of this image that I would very much like to see. Let's talk about this Good Boys poster that is advertising the movie that is out now. So from a timing standpoint, it does make sense that this poster would be here. I think this film came out either Friday or is coming out, but this is exactly the type of thing that would be advertised around this time. There were some phone calls, or I think Daily Mail followed up with the advertising company, Outdoor Advertising, I believe it's called, or something like that. And in their article, which proclaims that the photo was staged, Esoteric Ed covered this. They had contacted the advertising company, and a representative for the advertising company mentioned that that is not the ad that's there. They said they have no records of that ad being there right now, and therefore it's been photoshopped. Now, I don't think that that is an appropriate conclusion to draw simply from the statement that that's not the ad that's there right now. I think there's a lot of ways the advertising company could have incorrect information about what is there right now. Perhaps that's not what's scheduled to be there, but that's a physical poster that gets put inside there. I think we would need to learn more about the process of how those photos get inside there before we could really definitively determine if that was or was not there. People have claimed that they went there the following day and that poster wasn't there. I would also remind people that a lot of these outdoor advertising things have a mechanism that allows the posters to rotate. So if you stand there for 5 minutes and see one poster, you might walk away and another poster would show up. So I would want someone to have been there sort of minutes after this story broke, standing there on a live stream so that we know the time of day that the thing was photographed. I'd like to see that on a continuous loop for a few minutes to make sure it's not moving. I can't remember offhand if that is one of those moving ones or not, but I think most of them are. Now, here's another interesting thing about the claim that that poster has been photoshopped. So we've got this image of Ghislaine Maxwell with the glasses on, and I believe that this photo was taken with a smartphone. The reason I believe that is, as we zoom in, even on the lower resolution image, you can see a lot of noise around the edges here. We can see this high contrast edge where we've got a white cup against a darker gray background. It gets this sort of dark line in between the lightly colored pixels and the darker colored pixels. That to me seems to be a telltale sign of sharpening. Sharpening algorithms are typically applied to photographs in the smartphone before they're saved on the phone to give the photo an appearance of looking sharper, and increasing the contrast around edges is one of the ways that photo sharpening algorithms work. The software can actually detect these rapid changes in contrast, and those are basically seen as edges, and they are sharpened. We can see that here as we transition from Ghislaine Maxwell's sort of lightly colored shirt that she's wearing to the darker wall. Again, we see that high contrast edge being generated probably by a sharpening algorithm within the phone. The edges look rough. The edges change as we go over areas of lower contrast. Notice here, even though the colors are different, the contrast level is less. This is obviously much darker than this area, so we don't see that darker line increasing the sharpness there. That's an example of a sharpening algorithm failing to properly detect an edge. Okay, so this does seem like a photo that was taken with a smartphone, and it would be definitely much more difficult to Photoshop this in a convincing way using a smartphone image, because when you take a photo with a smartphone, all of these sharpening algorithms have already been applied. We can also see a number of JPEG artifacts. So the averaging of the colors that I spoke about that allows the photo to take less computer storage space, that also generates artifacts that usually result in noise around certain edges. We can see some pixel noise right here in this area of contrast. So even on the table here, these things look to me like JPEG artifacts taken with the smartphone. So I think this is a smartphone. As we look at these things, we can see these sort of noisy areas. Those all seem like JPEG artifacts to me, and artifacts of a noisier camera, which would be associated with a smartphone. So back to this original image from the New York Post, which is a much smoother image. And we can see, even as we zoom in on the pixels there, sorry, let me get this in Photoshop so we can zoom in on that a little better. Even as we zoom in on the pixels in Ms. Maxwell's face, we're going to notice some differences. Now, again, we don't have the original image here, so we don't know what processing has been done to it, but even as we move over these areas of differing contrast, I don't see as much of those lines coming in there. Now, someone may have applied sharpening to this. I would want to get back to our high-res image that appeared in the Post, but that's sort of not accessible to us. Let's see, this seems to be even higher resolution than the one I've got. So let's download this and put this into Photoshop and take a look at it. It would be great to find the original photographers of each of these images, but it's been speculated that the photographs may have been taken by Maxwell's attorney. Now that adds a really interesting wrinkle. So here's the picture we were just looking at, and yes, that does appear to be higher resolution. So we can see we do not have that similar sharpening happening here, and we can see that the characteristics of the noise in this image are much different than we saw in the other image. This is like pixel level noise. If we were to apply JPEG compression to these very closely, the contrast range in here is pretty low. I think a highly compressed version of this would change the look of the noise in images, or rather in pixels like that. So this is a very high resolution image, I agree. This was taken with a camera that has much greater quality, much higher resolution sensor than a smartphone would. We can practically read the license plates of these cars over here, and I imagine if we had the original image, I mean, look at that. We can, that is very good depth of field, because we can almost read the sign at the, I think this was a burrito place back here. I don't remember what that was, but we can see that this is clearly taken with a much higher quality image. Now, I don't know if this was cropped by the Post or if this was what was supplied to the Post or whatever, but this is the image that appeared in the New York Post. And again, it definitely seems like we've got some much higher resolution versions of that image that are available elsewhere. So here's one that I found on the internet, clearly seems to be the same image, and this is a full frame. We can see over here by the sign, in this image, there is very clearly the reflection of what looks to me to be this, I guess it's a Dodge Caravan or something like that. We can see the A-pillar of the windshield right here. Can people see that? A-pillar of the windshield right here. Okay, we've got the rear view mirror right there, okay? And I can tell you, this does not look to me like this has been photo manipulated. People can see the difference in the In-N-Out Burger sign here. We don't see those noisy pixels surrounding the high contrast areas as much as we did in the smartphone image. Now, this is the type of source image you would want if you were going to do photo retouching. As little compression as possible, as high pixel resolution as you can possibly get. So this would be a good candidate for photo retouching, and certainly something like this could be done, but keep in mind this is not simply Photoshop if we're talking about adding this reflection to the Good Boys sign. You would basically need a three-dimensional model of this car so that we could have a photograph of the front of the windshield from a different angle than what we're seeing standing over here in the restaurant. We would need the front of this car or a substantially similar car to create a reflection here, and that would require some 3D software like Maya or 3D Studio Max or Lightwave 3D or Blender, and that's a much higher degree of sophistication than just using Photoshop, which is a two-dimensional bitmap editing program. Doesn't allow you to easily do these type of 3D effects. And if this were manipulated, this would represent an extremely high level of sophistication. I do not believe that this poster was photoshopped there. Now, someone could physically walk over to this sign and insert a Good Boys sign in there, but it would have to be under the glass in order for us to see this reflection, and that would involve breaking the lock or however this mechanism works. And I don't know if that could happen unnoticed in such a busy area here. So I think that sign was there. It's possible that whoever spoke to the advertising company either got wrong information or somehow just put out that rumor and it hasn't been corroborated necessarily, but there are other aspects to this story that I would like to explore. We have heard that basically a day or so after the first story came out, Business Insider had another story about it where they say the photos of Ghislaine Maxwell might have been staged with her lawyer's help, and there are other outlets that are reporting that they were photoshopped. Now, that came out in part because of another image of Ghislaine Maxwell. Where have I got that other image? We want to make sure we have the proper images up here. The other photo of Ghislaine Maxwell showed her seated in profile. So there's this dog, and that'll come into play later. We see this rough edge, some very obvious artifacts here where it looks like the seat is clipped off. There's some repetitive patterning in the bricks back here that looks very unnatural. We've got this Audi here. So this is, I guess, somebody who's pulling out of the restaurant, leaving perhaps. It looks really close to, that Audi looks a bit strange to me. Is there a driver in it? No, so I can't see a driver. So it seems strange to me that this car would be right there. This car strikes me as an element that may have been added, and certainly cars and things with hard edges are a lot easier to add. This is too low resolution for us to tell, but is this a, there seem to be signs that this may have been added. We've got this kind of blurred edge at the top here, which looks to me like a 2 or 3 pixel feather might have been used to add this car. And it's strange to me that a car would be parked. This doesn't, this looks mighty close to the brick wall. Can we see, yeah, this pole appears to be reflecting, so maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps this car is actually there, but it seems strange that a car would be so close to this brick wall. It looks unnaturally close, and I'm not sure that those reflections match. This is a much easier thing to fake. We could just take an image of this white pole and sort of stick it in there. It's not the same as the car that we observed earlier, but what's going on here? This is our telltale sign. So people have spoken about this, but I want to illustrate for everyone exactly what's happening. There's a tool in Photoshop called the clone tool. And what it allows you to do is to select an area of the image by holding down one key and tapping, and then come over to another area of the image and paint things out. People can see how the dog is being erased by a picture of bricks. Ghislaine's foot is being erased by a picture of bricks. Now, what can happen is if you don't have a large area to select from and you sort of keep pulling from the same area and repainting to try to cover something, you can see how this pattern starts to repeat and it becomes a very unnatural looking effect. But let me just undo all of those paint strokes. But at the same time, if this technique is applied properly, like if we say, okay, I want this to look like the dog is not there, I might select an area of the bricks that I can match up very closely to the brick pattern, and you'll see now, okay, it's not working perfectly, but that's much less noticeable, and certainly depending on where I select and where I choose to paint to, this is a technique that can be made to work better than what we've seen above there. So people now have an idea how this sort of artifact got here. Now, why someone would do this remains another question. So again, this looks to me like this may in fact be a smartphone photo. We don't know who took this photo, but just again, going by some of the artifacts we see around the edges of the mug and some of the noise characteristics, this looks more like a smartphone photo to me. So perhaps this was, the tray is gone. This may have been taken by someone who just happened to be at the restaurant. So let's go down this road of exploring what if this was in fact staged by a media company, as is being alleged. Now, we've heard from the Daily Mail that there was metadata in the photo. Now, that's data that's attached to the photo that's not photographic data, but information about the photographic data, where it was taken, all those kind of things. The resolution, the format, the lens settings with more sophisticated cameras. So they're saying that because this dog Dexter is in the snapshot, that may be suggestive that this photo was staged with the help of her friend and attorney, this woman, Ms. Saffron, who who is the president of Meadowgate Media Investments. Meadowgate Media Investments is some sort of media investment company that is related to this lawyer who apparently the Daily Mail has done a great job of tracking down this dog. There are photos of the dog on her social media. So she could be out with a friend, walking the dog, doing whatever she might be doing with the dog. But Leah Saffron and Meadowgate Media are quite interesting. She seems to be a San Diego-based attorney. San Diego's about a 2-hour drive from that In-N-Out Burger where they are at, well, depending on the traffic. So I Googled this Meadowgate Media Investments, and I was surprised that if this is an actual media company, you would expect that putting its name in, one of the very first search returns would be meadowgatemedia.com or something like that, but we're just getting all of these different websites that basically track companies and give you data about companies that are registered. So I think it is a little bit anomalous that a media company that you would think is involved in advertising and looking for clients wouldn't have a website that is immediately available. I found this Westlake Legal Group. They're in Sterling, Virginia, so I don't know what their relationship is to this, but Googling for Meadowgate Media brought me to this, and they're just writing an article about a topic of interest having to do with these photographs of Ghislaine Maxwell. So why would somebody stage this? Well, we also know that according to the New York Post, Ghislaine Maxwell was reading a book called The Book of Honor, The Lives and Deaths, what's it called? Book of Honor, Lives and Deaths of CIA Operatives, something like that. Book of Honor, Lives and Deaths of CIA Operatives. So she's reading this book, there it is. And Ed remarked that she's done a book review of the book on Amazon.com, and that she is reviewing the Kindle format, but in the photograph that we've seen, in both photographs, she's quite clearly reading a hardcover version of the book. Now again, I don't find this too conclusive because I personally have done that. Sometimes people give me their books in hardcover, and then in order to have them with me at all times, I will also purchase the Kindle version, or sometimes the Kindle version is free depending on what kind of program you got going with Amazon.com. So I don't necessarily find it problematic that Ms. Maxwell is reviewing the Kindle version on Amazon, but she's seen reading the hardback version. I do find it strange, however, that someone who should be concerned that her former associates might be interested in killing her, given what's just happened to Jeffrey Epstein, allegedly, or that she might be under federal investigation, the fact that she would appear in public and draw so much attention to it by doing this review, it just seems strange to me. And it's been proposed that perhaps this Amazon review is some sort of steganographic message, an encoded message that's presented in plain sight so that people who are in the know get some sort of information from it that the rest of us do not. So I don't know that we're going to be able to figure that out, but it's a 5-star review. 414 people found it helpful. That's a lot of people. Obviously, people have been looking at this due to the unprecedented attention it's getting in social media, but that's a lot of people, so that stands out. This could be a two-way messaging system of some kind, but Maxwell says, a good friend of mine died recently under very tragic circumstances. Some of us saw it coming for quite a while, but it was still a huge shock when it finally happened. I picked up this book at the advice of a friend and absolutely couldn't put it down. I'd read it walking the dog, getting fast food, or even just lounging around the house. It helped me realize that my friend really believed in something, and that giving your life for the CIA, NSA, FBI, Mossad, or other intelligence agency is truly a higher calling and not something to mourn. A wholehearted recommendation. There's a lot in there. Is she calling out CIA, NSA, FBI, Mossad? Is there some sort of battle going on between the remaining co-conspirators and these agencies that, I mean, we don't know what happened to Jeffrey Epstein. We do know that he signed an updated last will and testament 2 days before he died. I think it's safe to presume that he knew he certainly wasn't free in jail, and he wasn't facing a lot of good options. It was very likely that Jeffrey Epstein was going to go to jail for the rest of his life and have a real difficult time there. So it wouldn't be unrealistic to presume that Jeffrey Epstein might have some kind of plan in place if he were to be arrested. He's put all of his finances, as I understand it, into some sort of a trust, which is interesting. I don't know that much about trusts, but I understand it's some sort of way to protect your assets where, the people accusing Jeffrey Epstein of the various things that he's been accused of, obviously there's multiple lawsuits going on. They're going to want to go after his assets. I think he's said to be worth something like $577 million. That would mean he's got a lot of money to bribe people. So possibly Jeffrey Epstein was killed by somebody in the jail, or possibly Jeffrey Epstein somehow bribed everybody around him in the jail. What if he paid that Tartaglione guy to, to say, hey, Tartaglione could have killed him? Maybe they wanted to generate all this confusion to misdirect us from what's going on. We don't know where Ghislaine Maxwell is, but it's very strange that she would show up right outside this particular In-N-Out Burger there in Los Angeles. I actually called the In-N-Out Burger, I called In-N-Out Burger corporate headquarters the other day, and I just wanted to ask them if they had any comment about this, if they had any maybe security camera footage that we could see. In-N-Out Burger was pretty tight-lipped about it, of course.
Good afternoon, Marketing Department speaking.
Hi, this is Jason Goodman calling. I was calling to inquire, I'm sure you've heard and probably even taken a number of calls about the appearance of this woman, Ghislaine Maxwell, at the restaurant on Cahuenga Boulevard off the 101 there in LA last week. Mm-hmm. Have you heard about that? Are you aware of that?
Oh, yeah, we were aware of it. We did get quite a few phone calls on this subject. What are you from a newspaper or television?
Well, I have my own news show, and we've been following this story for quite a while. It seems very, obviously In-N-Out Burger has nothing to do with who shows up at their restaurant, but it seems quite strange that someone who is implicated in such a horrendous criminal conspiracy would just so openly appear in public. I wonder if there's any security camera footage from the store that would reveal her sitting there, because there's been now a lot of, I believe,
speculation,
incorrect information in the news. Yeah.
Well, as a private family-owned company, In-N-Out Burger is very low-key, very modest. We don't really look for publicity. Mm-hmm. And, in that regard, we don't comment on anything when it has to do with celebrities or people.
Well, this is a criminal suspect. This woman's not a celebrity.
Well, I'm just saying in general. We get requests like if Brad Pitt or someone was at our store, they would want to know, when were they there? What did they eat?
Well, of course, that would be inappropriate because Mr. Pitt has the right to privacy. But this woman is a criminal who I'm saying, have you been in touch with the FBI? Is anyone getting information about was she in fact there? This is a matter of public interest to do with a horrendous crime.
Like that. If the FBI or the police did approach us, I'm sure we would release the video.
So they have not.
Now, as a private family-owned company, we just wouldn't comment on anything like that. If anyone that's at our restaurants, even is a high suspect.
Sure. In absence of comment, may I set aside the interest of news and just implore you to preserve whatever footage you may have and proactively seek out the FBI and the LAPD. That is shocking to me that they haven't contacted you yet, even to inquire, as I am, if she was in fact there.
They probably have. I'm not at leisure to disclose that, even if I did have that information.
Is there anyone who I could speak to about that, like the legal department or something?
Yeah, I'm the liaison for any calls regarding the media. And again, if you want to send me email, I'll be glad to share it with our executive team.
What's the email address?
But I doubt very much if anyone would comment, because we have had other requests last week and again today about this one person that says they feel like that picture was photoshopped.
No, I don't think it was. There's one in the public domain that has been, and I think that that's being put out there by someone who wants people to not find this woman. I believe she was there. I used to live right up the street from the restaurant. I've worked in Hollywood for many years in visual effects, and the first 2 photos that came out, I believe, were authentic, and she was sitting there.
I have no idea, but even our people that work in our restaurants, they wouldn't have taken notice to her.
But there's a security camera, of course.
Who would even know what she looks like?
Right, but there's got to be security cameras around the restaurant, I would presume.
I'm sure there are, but again, they would not disclose it to the media. If the police or the FBI did ask for it, I'm sure they'd be glad to cooperate, because we have in the past with other instances.
Right.
But for something like this, they wouldn't release video footage.
Again, I'm shifting my focus. I'm not interested. Let me pause you, because I'm not interested in the footage. What I'm saying now is, if the material has not been preserved, I think it's incredibly important that you guys reach out to the authorities. This is a woman who has been accused by hundreds of girls of being a rapist and a pimp.
Up with the media, I'm very well aware of what's going on and the situation. I'll give your suggestion to our executive VP, and if they want to, reach out and do that, if they haven't already done so.
Right.
I'm sure they will. What publication? You said you're a private.
It's called Crowdsource the Truth. Is the show?
Crowdsource the Truth.
Crowdsource. Like a crowd.
Okay, very good. I'll make a note of that too.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling, and I'm sorry I can't really
I understand.
help you in this instance, but again, I'll pass along your concerns, okay?
Thank you very much. So we can definitely understand why they don't want to go on the record making any kind of official comment, but I got the impression that the FBI didn't contact them, the local authorities didn't contact them. It's weird. I mean, we would definitely think there'd be some interest in locating Ms. Maxwell and questioning her, particularly now that Epstein is no longer around. So there's a lot of things to unravel here. I think certainly this secondary photograph being released with very obvious photoshopping in it, we don't know where this came from. I think 4chan or something like that. So this is one of these, 4chan is an interesting entity because it allows anonymous people to inject potentially fake news. And in this modern age of social media, people are picking these things up and treating everything as fact. Now, this is obviously a piece of evidence, but it's highly anomalous evidence for the various reasons that I've pointed out. I just don't think the lighting and the shadows of this car necessarily match other things that we're seeing in the scene here. It's troubling. And I mean, again, if this photo was staged by the lawyer, and perhaps the lawyer then said, okay, we have our photo that we're going to send to the New York Times to do our little PR camp, or rather the New York Post. Perhaps this was a planned public relations campaign to make people think that Ghislaine Maxwell was perhaps somewhere that she's not. Certainly a media company, a PR company would have contacts at newspapers. Maybe they duped the New York Post and told them, hey, somebody just snapped this photo, put it in the Post and run it. You know, the other thing that I wanted to point out is Ghislaine does look very much younger in this photo. She looks like a woman maybe in her 30s or 40s. And in the other photos that we see of her at the burger restaurant, she looks much more like a woman of her actual age. She looks like someone in her 50s or 60s, and that's not criticizing her. That's just a statement of my observation of fact. Her face looks a bit more wrinkled, a bit less smoothly perfect. Obviously, she's got her glasses on, so that's tough to evaluate, and anything at all could have been done to this Ghislaine Maxwell photo that we saw in the New York Post. probably the easiest thing to do to it would be just to smooth it out a bit with like a blur tool. And this is something that's commonly done in photo retouching to create a sort of a more flattering image of the person. We could just come in here and kind of blur the thing a little bit and remove some blemishes, and it doesn't do much to change the overall look of the person, but it just tones down the imperfections a bit and has a tendency to make the person look younger, better, a little bit sort of smoother. Again, this is a low resolution image, but I think we can see that she already looks a little bit, less, well, let's just say we've taken out some of the features that would allow you to immediately identify this as an older person. You just undo some of those changes that I've just made. Take her back to how she started, and you can see those wrinkles come right back in there. We can tone them down a bit. So, this image in the post may very well have been Ghislaine Maxwell sitting there at the restaurant, and somebody just came in there and applied a little bit of soft blur under her eyes. And that's a much more flattering photo if you are a vain former model or a beautiful person of any sex who wants to look good in the newspaper. That might be the photo that you and your friend, the lawyer/PR agent, choose to release in a campaign that's a combination of misdirection and steganographic messaging, perhaps to other people. Now, this whole topic has been dubbed a conspiracy theory. However, I would remind everybody that Ghislaine Maxwell is named as a suspect in a massive conspiracy. So the concept that she would continue to operate with others to cover her crimes or to somehow try to escape. I think it's interesting that Epstein's money went into a trust that might allow trustees of that trust to be protected from any kind of lawsuit against Jeffrey Epstein because they're not the ones who did it. But at the same time, it might allow them to somehow access that money in a way that it could be funneled to Jeffrey Epstein or his surviving co-conspirators. So this remains a really interesting mystery. I think what we're looking at is an extremely sophisticated social engineering campaign, possibly orchestrated by the lawyer and Ms. Maxwell through this media company. We're going to need more evidence to examine that, but there were just too many loose ends out there hanging around and too many people jumping to conclusions about what had been photoshopped, what maybe hadn't been photoshopped. And a lot of this is injected to cause confusion for sure. I think that people need to keep in mind that, this is, we're living in a time where media is very sophisticated, very much more so than in the past. People might recall the famous backyard photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, this was created in 1963 approximately, and whether you believe this photograph was taken by Lee Harvey Oswald's wife or somebody else, this photograph is one of the most famous photographs in terms of its association with a so-called conspiracy theory that ever existed. In fact, I don't even know if the creators of this photograph had any idea the life that it would have. People have called many aspects of the photo into question, including the angle that Mr. Oswald is standing at. There's a very conspicuous bump in his wrist that matches the bump of a police officer in the Dallas Police named Roscoe White. The fingertips are a cause of question. The shadows falling in different directions. We can see that the shadow behind him is falling at an angle, and the shadow under his nose is coming straight down. The shape of Oswald's chin has been questioned. There's a number of things that have been questioned about this photograph, and it has been the ammunition of those that would call anyone that would analyze this evidence a conspiracy theorist for many, many years. And it's just served to put this cloud of confusion around evidence and things having to do with Lee Harvey Oswald. So the question that I ask is this In-N-Out Burger photograph intended to have that same effect? Intelligence agencies and even lay people are now aware of the impact of injecting an element of evidence like this photograph into the public discourse, and what it does is it muddies the waters. So I'm hopeful that our conversation here has helped to undo some of that. Perhaps it will inspire someone else to get more information on this. Certainly if anyone who was at the In-N-Out Burger restaurant that day and might have seen what was going on, they could come forward. They could email me on truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org. If anybody knows anybody who lives in the area, unfortunately, I have, my friends who live in the area have moved out of that direct vicinity and nobody's had the time to go over there. But again, I'd want to put some eyes on that billboard and see if it's one of these rotating ones, and see if there's any way that that Good Boys poster could have gotten in there. That's all I've got on this for right now. I will be back at 5 p.m. Eastern for Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America. That's only on Patreon. So please, if you enjoyed this broadcast and if you want access to more totally exclusive Crowdsource the Truth content, please become a sponsor by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And you can catch Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America on either of those two channels. You can also get it on patreon.com/Jerome Corsi. It's so important that viewers sponsor the show. None of this information is anything that YouTube or Google or major advertisers want you to know about. So what they do is they try to exert their economic influence over the news that I can talk about by demonetizing these videos, by preventing the entire Jason Goodman channel from being monetized on YouTube. So it's critically important that people go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and sponsor the show so that these broadcasts can keep coming. Thanks for watching, everybody.